The day Grandma died, I felt nothing. And then too much. Like someone pulled the plug on everything solid, and I just floated. Her name was Alice, but I never called her that. To me, she was just Grandma, with that cinnamon smell on her sweaters, and her old, chipped coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Cook." She used to drink peppermint tea out of it every night. I kept it after she passed. Couldn't bring myself to throw it away. I held on to that mug like it meant something. I guess it did. Anyway, a week after the funeral, I got a call from the lawyer. He said her will had been finalized. She'd left me the house. Me. Not my parents. Not my Aunt Sharon, who hadn't visited in 5 years but somehow managed to give a tearful speech at the wake. Just me. I should have been happy. I think I was, for a few seconds. But the second I told my mom on the phone, there was silence. That stiff, cold silence like I'd dropped a plate during dinner. Then she said, flatly, you know she wasn't in her right mind. I laughed, but not out of humor. She knew exactly what she was doing. More silence. Then she hung up. They showed up the next day. My parents. Sharon too. All standing in my tiny apartment like they were staging an intervention. My dad sat down without asking. My mom paced. Sharon had a manila folder in her hand, and this looked like she'd already won something. You know this isn't fair, Sharon started. It's a family property. I looked at her. She left it to me. She was old, my dad said, voice low. People get confused. No, I said. She was clear. She wanted me to have it. She even told me once. She told you. Sharon cut in. That's your proof. I didn't argue. What was the point? They didn't want logic. They wanted the house. That night, I came home from my night shift at the gas station and found all my stuff, clothes, my laptop, that stupid mug, dumped in a trash bag outside my parents' door. The note taped to the door just said, "Enjoy your new house." I stood there for a long time, holding that bag, watching the light in the living room go off. The blinds twitch. I didn't cry. Not then. I drove to Grandma's house in silence. 2 hours on empty roads, no music. Just my own heartbeat in my throat. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Older too. The siding was peeling, and one of the upstairs windows was cracked. I unlocked the front door. Her key was still on my keychain, and stepped inside. It still smelled like her. Cinnamon, lemon oil, something warm underneath. I stood there in the dark, holding my trash bag full of whatever my parents hadn't thrown out, and I whispered, "I'm home." The next morning, I found mold in the bathroom. The boiler didn't work. There was a soft spot in the hallway floor that made a sad little whump every time I stepped on it. And in the pantry, a raccoon. He just blinked at me, slow, like this is my house now. I named him Carl. We reached an understanding. I made do. Showered with cold water. Slept on the couch for the first month because I couldn't stand being in her room. Ate off paper plates. Used duct tape on the window frame when it started rattling in the wind. That mug? Still used it every morning. Even though the handle had cracked and burned my hand once. Sometimes I talk to it. Stupid, I know. But it felt like the only thing that had memory left in it. One night, I found a YouTube video titled, "How to Patch Drywall When You're Broke and Dumb." The guy sounded like he hadn't slept in days. I liked him immediately. I patched the wall in the dining room. It looked like crap. I posted a photo online anyway. Said, "Day 1 of fixing the house my family said I didn't deserve." Someone commented, "You do deserve it. Keep going." I don't know why, but I saved that comment. Took a screenshot. I still have it. After that, I kept posting. Little things. Fixing a leaking pipe. Trying and failing to paint a straight line. Learning what primer actually does. People liked it. They started following me. Some of them donated tools. One woman, Susan from Ohio, mailed me a whole set of brushes with a note. "You're doing better than you think." I cried the night I got that box. Quietly. Sitting on the kitchen floor with the mug between my hands, feeling it warm me up from the outside in. There's a kind of loneliness that sinks into your bones when you've been kicked out of your own life. But there's also something weirdly powerful about having nothing left to prove to anyone. That house became my project. My ritual. My therapy. Every creaky floorboard I fixed. Every hole I patched. Every rusted hinge I replaced. It was like stitching myself back together. I started calling the process the rebuild. Not just the house. Me. Then came the email from the YouTube channel. A renovation series. They wanted to feature me. I thought it was spam at first. Then I saw the logo. It was real. They said my videos had heart. That they felt true. I stared at that email for a long time. Then I went to the kitchen, poured peppermint tea into the mug, and whispered, "You seeing this, Grandma?" That was the first time I laughed out loud in weeks. And for once, it didn't sound bitter. Filming with the YouTube crew felt like someone dropped a movie set in the middle of my quiet little life. They showed up in a huge van, black, with a logo on the side and folding chairs that looked way too clean for a construction site. Two producers, a sound guy named Gabe who kept bumping his boom mic into everything, and Katie, the main producer, probably my age, with messy hair, fast eyes, and the kind of smile that made you think she didn't take bullshit from anyone. She walked through the house like she was feeling its pulse. "You know," she said, standing in the middle of the living room, "this place has a soul." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just pointed to a water stain on the ceiling and said, "That soul leaks during thunderstorms." She laughed. Even better. That day, they filmed me trying to patch some drywall I'd already patched twice. I still hadn't gotten it right. They loved it. Apparently, people like watching someone try and fail and try again. At one point, I accidentally dropped the mug. It slipped from my hand mid-scene and hit the floor with a horrible sound. Everyone froze. But it didn't shatter. Just rolled in a lazy circle and stopped at Gabe's boot. I picked it up, running my thumb over the chip in the rim. Still warm. Katie tilted her head. "That yours?" "Was my grandma's," I said, quieter than I meant to. She didn't push it, just nodded and went back to adjusting her shot list. The crew stayed for 3 days. They filmed me restoring an old window, sanding down the banister, repainting a door I once kicked in during a panic attack I never told anyone about. We ate takeout on the porch. Someone brought beer. They made fun of how many extension cords I had. "You know you're one overloaded socket away from arson, right?" Gabe joked. I grinned. "If I go up in flames, at least film it in 4K. The night they left, I stood in the kitchen holding the mug, staring out at the porch lights. And I felt this weird ache. Like something was starting to shift. Like I wasn't just surviving anymore. Then my phone buzzed. It was a comment. Just one line. "I wish my dad had fought for something the way you're fighting for that house." I don't know why, but I sat down on the floor and cried. Not a breakdown. Not a movie cry. Just this soft, leaking kind of cry that snuck up on me like a memory. I thought about the time I was 14 and tried to fix the lawnmower on my own because my dad said, "Be a man and figure it out." I sliced my hand open on a blade I didn't know was sharp. When he saw the blood, he just said, "Told you." Grandma wrapped my hand and gave me an ice pop. Told me, being a man isn't about pretending you know everything. It's about giving a damn. That line stayed with me, more than anything he's ever said. A week later, I got a DM from a real estate agent. She said she'd seen the renovation video. Said the house, now fixed up, now famous, was a historic gem. Said if I was ever interested in selling, she had a couple from Seattle who'd pay in cash. I stared at the message for a full 10 minutes. Selling had never crossed my mind. Not once. But now, after everything, I didn't reply. Not yet. Just left it sitting there, unopened like a letter I wasn't ready to read. The next morning, I made tea. Same mug. Sat on the porch steps while Carl the raccoon waddled across the lawn with a stolen granola bar he'd probably fished from my trash. "You're the only one who doesn't ask for anything," I told him. He blinked like, "That's your problem, not mine," and kept walking. That's when my mom liked one of my videos. No message. No comment. Just a heart. It sat there for days. Haunting. Then came the call. It was late, past midnight. I was halfway through editing a video called "How Not to Refinish Your Floors" when my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in months. I almost ignored it. Then picked up. "Jimmy," my dad said. His voice sounded older. Not weak, just like it was holding something in. I didn't speak. I saw the video. The one where you fixed the porch. Silence. "You did good. I mean, real good." "We didn't. I didn't expect that." I waited. Then, like he'd rehearsed it, he said, "We'd like to visit. Just see the place. You know, reconnect." My throat tightened. I almost laughed. "You kicked me out," I said. "I know," he replied, too fast. I could hear my mom in the background. Whispering. Or crying. I couldn't tell. "I don't want anything from you," he added. "We just want to see what you've done." That house meant something to all of us. There it was. That thing. That quiet assumption that now that it was worth something, it belonged to them again. I didn't scream. Didn't curse. I just said, calm as I could, "It's not yours anymore." Then I hung up. That night, I finally replied to the real estate agent. Let's talk. Selling the house felt like cutting off a limb I'd already stitched back on. But I went through with it. Megan and Jordan, the Seattle couple, flew out the next week. She was a textile designer. He did environmental architecture. The kind of people who wore linen without looking pretentious. They walked through the house like they were meeting an old friend. Touched the walls gently. Took photos of the stained glass I'd uncovered behind old plywood in the stairwell. This house has a heartbeat, Megan said, placing her hand on the banister I spent 2 weeks sanding. You can feel it. I didn't say much. Just nodded, tight-lipped. I told them about the creaky board in the hallway and how to jiggle the lock on the bathroom door so it wouldn't stick. Told them about Carl the raccoon, who still visited sometimes. Told them not to repaint the upstairs wallpaper. It had been Grandma's favorite. And mine, too, once I started looking at it long enough. They made a full offer by that evening. No haggling. Cash. It was done. That night, I walked the house room by room. Lights off. Just me and the echoes. I stood in the kitchen with that mug in my hands, the chipped World's Okayest Cook, one, and stared at the spot on the wall where her calendar used to hang. Always filled out in blue pen, with little hearts drawn on the days she'd planned to call me. I remembered once, when I was maybe 10, I spilled apple juice all over her crossword book. Thought I ruined it. She just smiled and said, well, guess we'll just have to invent new answers, huh? No yelling. No guilt. Just kindness. I put the mug in my backpack, took one last breath of the cinnamon sunlight smell that somehow still lingered, and walked out. The next morning, I decided to clean out the attic. One final task before the closing. Most of it was junk, old trunks, dusty mason jars, bags of mildewed fabric. I almost didn't notice the small wooden box behind the insulation, tucked near the back corner. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Yellowed, tied with twine. Most were love letters, between Grandma and Grandpa during his deployment. Sweet, full of longing. Descriptions of weather and peach cobbler and how much he missed his laugh. But one envelope was different. Plain white. Unmarked. No date. Tucked in the very bottom, like it didn't want to be found. It was addressed to Daniel, my dad. I opened it. Inside was a printed copy of an older will. In that version, dated 3 years earlier, the house went to him. My hands went cold. Then I saw the note paperclipped to it. Handwritten. Grandma's cursive, shakier than I remembered, but unmistakable. Changed my mind. He tried to put me in a home behind my back. Let him find a home of his own. I just stood there, breathing hard. The wood creaked under my feet. It was quiet, but I could almost hear her voice again, humming in the kitchen, soft and low, the way she used to when cooking. A tune I never recognized, but always felt safe hearing. She knew. She knew exactly what kind of man he'd become. And she made a choice. For the first time since getting that house, I didn't feel like a fraud. I felt chosen. I sat in the attic for a long time. Dust in my nose, letter in my lap, knees pulled to my chest like a kid. I didn't cry. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. So exactly what my dad would do. Hide behind smiles and fake respectability, then stab you in the back with a clipboard. I wanted to call him. Send him a picture of the letter. Of the will. Of the little note that made it all so goddamn clear. But I didn't. Not because I was noble, I wasn't. I just didn't want to give him that moment. Not even the satisfaction of knowing I knew. I burned the old will in the fire pit behind the house. Watched the paper curl, turn to ash, and disappear into the air. The next day, I met with the buyers. Signed the final documents. Megan hugged me again, warm, soft, the kind of hug you don't realize you need until it's over. They handed me a gift bag. Inside? A hand-painted mug. It said, "Builder of things that last." My throat closed. I thanked them. Said goodbye. Drove away. Didn't look in the rearview mirror once. I didn't plan on checking my DMs that day. I'd been busy unpacking boxes in my new place in Charleston. Smaller, quieter, cleaner, and halfway through trying to fix a cabinet door that kept falling off its hinges when my phone buzzed. Instagram. A message request from someone named Laura M. The preview read, "Hi. I think we might be related. I'm sorry if this is strange." I didn't click on it right away. Just sat there. Cabinet door hanging loose in my hand. Heartbeat weirdly loud. I opened it. She said her name was Laura Martin. She was 32. Lived in Asheville. Worked as a school counselor. Said she'd been watching renovation content lately to help her relax, and that one of my videos popped up in her feed. That's when she saw my last name. It was her mom's maiden name. And that's when things clicked. She said she'd been trying to find her biological father for years. All her mother told her was that his name was Daniel, that they met in Georgia, briefly, that he knew about the pregnancy, but wasn't ready for anything real. He left, and never looked back. She said she wasn't angry. She just wanted to know. She ended the message with, "I don't expect anything. I'm not asking you for anything, but I think I might be your sister. If you're willing to talk, even once, I'd like that." I reread the message 3 times, then once out loud, which made it feel even more insane. A sister? I sat back against the wall, mind spinning. Half of me was already building a defense. Maybe it was a mistake. A scam. A weird fan. Something off. But another part of me knew. There'd always been gaps. Things my parents never talked about. Things that didn't quite add up. I remembered once, when I was a kid, I found a photo tucked between some old books in the den. It was of my dad, younger, smiling, with a woman I didn't recognize. And her belly was round. Pregnant. When I asked about it, my mom snapped the photo from my hands and said, "That's nothing. Don't dig into things that aren't yours." I forgot about it. Until now. I didn't message Laura back. Instead, I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring. "Jimmy," she said, surprised. "I need to ask you something," I said. My voice was tight, weirdly steady. "What is it? Did Dad have a kid before me?" There was silence. Then the sound of her breath, sharp, held. "Where's this coming from?" she asked, guarded. "I got a message," I said. "From someone who says she's my sister. Her name's Laura." More silence. Then, softer. "Oh God. So it's true?" I asked. A long exhale. "I wanted him to tell you himself. Years ago. He never did." "No," she said. "He refused. Said it was a mistake. That the woman didn't want him involved. But I think he just couldn't face it. Couldn't handle what it meant." I rubbed my hand over my face, sitting on the floor, eyes shut. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't know how," she said. "And by the time I thought maybe I should, you were already distant." Angry. I didn't want to make it worse. I wanted to yell. To scream something unforgivable. But the part of me that had spent years learning how to breathe through the hurt just didn't. "She wants to meet," I said. "I think you should," she whispered. I didn't expect that. I nodded, even though she couldn't see. "Yeah, I think I will." That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Grandma's note. Let him find a home of his own. And now this. Another version of home I didn't know existed. I finally messaged Laura back the next morning. "Hi. Thank you for reaching out. I'm open to talking, maybe even meeting. I don't know how to do this. But yeah, I'd like to try." She replied almost instantly. "Thank you. That means more than you know." We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop in Asheville. Neutral ground. Not too loud. Not too quiet. The kind of place with mismatched mugs and uneven chairs and a chalkboard menu written in 5 different types of handwriting. I got there early. I always do. Nervous habit, I guess. I picked a table by the window and ordered peppermint tea without thinking. Only realized why when the mug came. Not mine, obviously, but close enough to sting a little. She walked in right on time. Laura. Jeans. Green jacket. No makeup. Just real. And yeah, she looked like me. Not in a movie way, but in a weird, specific way. The same way I blink when I'm thinking. The way her shoulder twitched when she laughed. The way she sat with her ankle tucked behind the opposite leg like it helped her feel grounded. She spotted me. Walked over. "Jimmy," she said. Yeah, I stood. "Hey." We hugged. Awkward at first. Then not. She smelled like laundry and vanilla. Like someone who kept their world calm on purpose. We sat. First 15 minutes? Weird. Stiff. Small talk. Weather. Traffic. Coffee shop music. I dropped my spoon and she knocked over her napkin dispenser. We both laughed too loud, and that finally cracked something open. Then, finally, "I didn't think you'd say yes," she said. I shrugged. "I didn't think I would either." "I'm glad you did." "Me too, I thought. But I didn't say it yet." She told me about her life. Her work. Her daughter, Ruby, 5 years old, obsessed with frogs and glitter glue. Showed me a photo. Ruby had this open, crooked grin that made something in my chest lurch. "She looks like you," Laura said. I smiled, blinking fast. God help her. We talked for hours. Slowly. Carefully. Not digging too deep, but not skimming either. Just following the thread. At one point, I told her about Grandma. She knew, I said. Not about you, but about what Dad really was. She changed her will. Left the house to me because he tried to put her in a home behind her back. Laura swallowed. I'm sorry. You didn't do it. Still, she said. That kind of betrayal, it hangs on people. I nodded. Then she reached into her bag and pulled something out. A photo. A black and white picture. Grainy. A little bent. My dad. Younger. Smiling. Arm around a woman I'd never seen. Her mom. And right between them, on the table, was a mug. A familiar one. My breath caught. That mug, I started. Laura nodded. Same one. Almost identical. I kept Grandma's. She smiled. Soft. Weird, right? Yeah, I said, voice thick. Weird. We didn't say much after that. Just sat. Then, just before we left, she said, Mom told me once she tried to reach out. Years ago. Wrote your grandma a letter. I turned to her. She did. Yeah. She said she didn't want anything. Just thought maybe I had a brother. Wanted her to know. What did Grandma do? She sent her back a photo of you, Laura said. No note. Just the picture. You were maybe 7. Grinning, holding a toy hammer. I remembered that photo. It had always been in a frame in the hallway. Mom asked me once why she thought your grandma did that. Laura went on. And then she answered her own question. Said, she wanted me to see he was safe. That he already had enough pain. And that she was protecting that. I looked down. That photo. That frame. That hallway. I thought it was just there for nostalgia. But it was a message. A shield. And now, it wasn't needed anymore. We said goodbye without saying anything final. No promises. Just a look that said, you're not alone anymore. Back in Charleston, I kept working. The new place wasn't flashy. Needed plenty of help. But it was mine. I started filming again. Called the new series Builder of Things That Last. Not just about homes. About people. Scars. Repair. Choice. One night, I posted a short video, no music, no edits. Just me sitting on the porch. That same mug in my hands. Steam rising. I looked into the camera and said, some things break because they're weak. Some things break because they were never given a chance to grow. And some things break so we can see what's underneath. I paused, then added, turns out, fixing a house is easier than fixing what lives inside it. But you can still try. I hit upload. Went back inside. Sat down. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel like something was missing. Just quietly, beginning.